So as we get towards the end of the year, I've been thinking about, what am I hoping to see from Neural DSP in terms of the quad cortex next year? And this is something I've actually been keeping a running list of just to keep track of some of my gripes and some of my hopes for the device. I figured I'd spend a few minutes here today, not too long, just kind of sharing kind of what I'd like to see out of the quad cortex in 2024. And I'd love to hear what all of the other users would like to see. Feel free to throw your thoughts in the comments below. When I think about what I want out of 2024, I think when we start out, I think we would all talk about plugin compatibility. Funny thing is, for me, I don't use the plugins yet. Once they're compatible with the Quad Cortex, I'll probably start looking at them. So it's not super important to me in terms of I want to get some plugins I'm already using onto the Quad Cortex. But I think this is really important for Neural DSP for a couple of reasons. One, it fulfills a promise they made when they first came out with the Quad Cortex. They've been talking about this since I think even before it launched. So they need to follow through on that. It's a credibility thing, it's a viability thing. So it needs to get done for that reason. And two, I think once the compatibility is done, my hope is that the two sides of Neural DSP, the Quad Cortex development side and the plugin development side, can be a little more combined. And maybe they can get some more throughput if they're not running two separate teams, and they can get some acceleration and move faster on both fronts. Two, and this is a nitpick I've had for a while, stop auto-assigning the stomp switches, or at least have a parameter in the settings that allows you to turn that off. I hate this so much. Maybe it's me and my OCD not wanting, various things assigned when I don't want them assigned, but I don't want a stomp switch assigned unless I specifically assign it. Number three, I really like if each preset had a default mode, meaning whether it's scene or stomp or hybrid. As you build out a preset, each one's going to have a specific approach you're going to want to take. Some you're going to want to use in stomp mode, some you're going to want to use in hybrid mode, some in scene mode. And it would be really nice if the preset would automatically load in on its preferred mode. Fourth, I'd like to see a lot better documentation on the captures that Neural DSP provides on the Quad Cortex. It's so just hit and miss. You don't know what's what. You don't know what the gain levels are. You don't know anything. I think they could really learn some things from Amalgam and how they name their captures. But right now, the Neural DSP captures that just get included on the Quad Cortex have no idea what each one is. You just got to kind of peck around until you can find one that works for you. And of course, I want to see new AMP models in the new year. For me, I'd love to see a good Dumble model. I'm sure there's other AMP models that folks would like to see. Again, feel free to throw those in the comments below. I'd love to hear kind of what your ideas are for good models that are missing. But I think they need to continue to add in new models to the Quad Cortex. I was encouraged by the new models on the last release when they added the Kraken, they added the Matchless. Both those models were really good, and I felt the quality of those models were maybe even a little bit above some of the other ones that have been on the Quad Cortex for a while. And so I'm excited for Neural DSP to add in more models to the Quad Cortex. So these are kind of the few that I'd like to see that I think are pretty straightforward or already in motion. What I want to do now is talk about a few that I'd like to see that are a little harder for Neural DSP to do, and I realize this, but still things I'd like to see. As they're doing updates, I'd really like to see them kind of continuously improve the existing models and cabs and effects that are on the Quad Cortex. I think this is something that Line 6 does really well as they release new versions. Not only are they releasing new capabilities, but I keep hearing people talk about, oh, this is better and this is better. I want to make sure that Neural DSP is thinking about those existing capabilities on the Quad Cortex, and as they're doing new releases, are they making small tweaks and improvements to those? Because I think, although a lot of features on the Quad Cortex I really like, I think there's still room for improvement, and some of the effects specifically aren't necessarily on par with some of the effects you might get, say, from a Fractal. Speaking of Fractal, and this is something I did in my video where I talked about things the Fractal does I wish Quad Cortex did. I wish there was more kind of ability to tweak the amp models, separate preamp from power amp, have other power amp options like a variac or switching two types and those kinds of things. So I think having more flexibility in the amp models is something I'd like to see. I'd really like to see the CPU limits be enforced by scene and not by preset. And I realize this might be very difficult, but again, this is something I saw when I was playing around with a Fractal FM3. Through the use of channels, the Fractal is able to maximize its CPU capability and still have multiple amps available on the preset. Because of the way the Quad Cortex works, if you have multiple amp models in the preset, it has to reserve the CPU capacity to run all of those amp models at the same time, even though you might never want to do that. So it'd be cool if we could do CPU limits by scenes. So as you're building out scenes, it might tell you, oh, you can't turn that on. There's not enough CPU to run this scene. But you could have those models there for other scenes where you might be switching between amp models and effects and things. And lastly, one thing I'd like to see is make all blocks maintain a stereo signal. And I realize this might churn up CPU, but it would be nice if you didn't have to worry about your routing in terms of maintaining your stereo signal. You didn't have to worry about, oh, my stereo chorus is running into my amp. My amp is basically making that stereo chorus mono. It'd be nice if every block, no matter its type or what it's doing, would just maintain that stereo signal from the get-go. So these are some of my thoughts on what I'd like to see next year from the Quad Cortex. Again, I'd love to hear what you guys want out of the Quad Cortex next year. Feel free to throw it in the comments below. It'd be great to get a good discussion going on this. And I hope everybody has a great new year, and thanks for watching.